maintenance of switches. Anyway, Thomas Dimitrovich here. Welcome to another IAEI News Live. We're going to talk about panel boards. We're talking panel boards today, so hopefully you are ready for a fun switches. Anyway, hopefully you're ready for a fun session, and we're going to dig into the latest edition of NFPA 70B, and we'll do a little refresher. Just bring everybody back up to speed. I see we got Joseph Viola, we got Mr. Hofkin in the house, Lou Petrucci. Thank you for joining. We got Robert from Omaha. You are too funny, buddy. And David Engelhart in the house. So today, discussion, maintenance of panel boards. The last session I believe we did was on switches. We're moving up in the world, and we're going to talk about panel boards. So panel boards and maintenance, get your 70B edition out, or open up your NFPA link, because it all starts now. Hey, you're back. I was just getting everything ready. All right, so today's discussion. All right, so panel boards. You know, here's the interesting thing. Here's an item I think that will be interesting for our discussion about panel boards. So you think about a panel board is a pretty complicated little beast. I could argue switches are a little complicated as well, but we didn't get into some of the ancillary items that might be installed in a switch, but we got panel boards. Now we've got a lot that can be in a panel board. Obviously, you're going to have the overcurrent protected device. You have circuit breakers and fuses, or switches, fusible switches. Hey, Nihad El Sharif, good to see you, brother. So you got breakers, you got fuses, fusible switches. You'll have possibly metering, right? You'll possibly have metering. You could have a panel board that has a 1200 amp main, and it has an arc reduction technology on it. It might have ground fault protection of equipment. Things could get pretty complicated. And I know switches are the same way, and we really didn't cover that aspect of the switch. But that is something to think about, that it is possible to have something that's much more complicated than just a panel board. All right. So having said that, let's talk panel board maintenance, or maintenance of panel boards. And obviously you're going to have your edition of NFPA link out. So remember 70B, and also I did get my book, but they shipped it to my office in St. Louis, which I don't have an office in St. Louis anymore. So the guys down there sent me pictures of my book, and they're like having fun with it. I'm sure that my book is getting well used down there at the Busman plant. So, but in any case, I don't have my physical book, but that's okay because I have NFPA link. Okay. First off, the word maintenance. This is an interesting one. I think it's interesting. The word maintenance is used 215 times in the NEC. Believe it or not. And I know that it can be pretty controversial. But if I just think about, if I go to NFPA link, and I'm going to just show you this now. I'm already logged in to NFPA link, but again, I can't say, the more and more I use NFPA link, the more excited I get about it. I don't know. It's just the way I am. But I am a book person. But let's take a look at NFPA 2023 edition. And if we search for the word maintenance in all of NFPA 70, look at this. I got 22 pages worth of areas in the book where that word is used. 522.77, the condition of maintenance and supervision shall ensure that only qualified persons service the permanent amusement attraction. That's in 522. 706, the required maintenance shall be in accordance with the manufacturer's requirements and industry standards, and they should reference 70B in there. 110.17, service and maintenance of equipment. Now think about what we did in the NEC. Remember, over the last few cycles, reconditioning has gotten some love, right? So what the 2023 code cycle did was it introduced the term maintenance, and I'm going to go to Article 100. And I know this is dangerous because when you click on Article 100, you get more than 300 terms that are defined. So I'm going to scroll down, but I believe maintenance, or actually servicing, that is what was defined. We defined servicing. Maintenance is not defined in the NEC. Now let's take a look at the definition of servicing. Service equipment, that's not what we want. Service, that's not what we want. Service, separately, service. Am I in the right edition? I am. Service entrance, service equipment, service lateral, servicing, there it is. Yeah. All right, so servicing. The process of following a manufacturer's set of instructions or applicable industry standards to analyze, adjust, or perform described actions upon equipment with the intention to preserve or restore the operation performance of the equipment. And the informational note says servicing often encompasses maintenance and repair activities. So the term maintenance is used in the definition of servicing. And again, if I look at all of these areas where we use the word maintenance in the book, look, this is just Article 100. Restricted industrial establishment with restricted public access, where the conditions of maintenance and supervision ensure that only qualified persons service the installation. Electrolytic cells, space and envelope, wherein operation or maintenance is normally performed. Servicing, we already said, encompassing maintenance. So there's areas in the code. Now, if you want to search all of NFPA 70, you just click on that radio button and there they are. So 20 some pages of that. So maintenance is used 215 times there. It's used 45 times in 70E and then 159 times in NFPA 99. So we have to understand what maintenance is, what condition of maintenance is, and that is what we're doing in this session. So the thought process here is to take a look at 70B, the new 70B, which is now a standard, and look at what are the requirements that are in N70B. What does 70B offer us with regard to maintenance, specifically as it pertains to Panelboards? So 70B, again, does not follow the NEC style manual, although it is a part of the trilogy. I call it the trilogy. You have 70 as the installation requirements, 70E is safe work practices, and 70B is maintenance. And I'll tell you what, if you're following 70E and you're not following one of the other two, including maintenance, then you're not following 70E. So it's an integral part of all that. But it follows the regulations governing the development of NFPA standards, regulations. It uses the manual of style for NFPA technical committee documents. And the last time that I can find that was revised was July of 2004. That's a long time ago. But that is the manual of style for NFPA technical committee documents. All right, so let's just look at how it's laid out. What are the chapters? This is what you have. Now, as part of the, remember, if this was using the NEC style manual, definitions would be in Article 100. There is no Article 100. This goes by chapters. Chapter 1 is administration, 2 is reference publications, 3 is definitions, and 4 is general. And what we're going to do is take a look, and we're going to start and just take a look at chapter 1 as an example. What does chapter 1 tell us? And here's why I'm doing this. I'm telling you, in my opinion here, we want to make sure that we understand the hierarchy here. So we're going to start a little bit up front, more so than what we did last time. I want to start a little bit on some of the basic principles of your safety or your maintenance plan. So in chapter 1, we've got the scope. It tells us that preventive maintenance of electrical, electronic, and communication systems and equipment. That's very, very broad, right? We want to protect the safeguard of persons, property, and processes from the risk associated with the failure or breakdown or malfunction. And we want to have a means to establish a condition of maintenance of the electrical equipment, in this case, the panel board, and the systems for safety and reliability. Now, when I say systems, when I'm thinking about a panel board, I might think about my ground fault protection of equipment. I might consider zone selective interlocking as a system. I might consider arc flash reduction as possibly a system. So there might be systems within energy management. I might have an energy monitoring system inside the panel board. So I have to think about the failure of all of those components. It's not just about the panel board, which is, to Robert from Omaha's perspective, it's the panel board is not necessarily everything. The panel board is just the guts, right? It's not the enclosure. So I could make an argument, Robert, that because of the title of this is panel boards, that I'm not talking about everything else, but here's my thought process. We'll hit panel boards, but we're going to talk about some of the ancillary stuff that you might find in there. And we'll talk about how you navigate 70B to pick all that stuff up. Oh, wrong computer. All right, so 1.3, the application. This is now, you're going to see these words. That first bullet item right there, you're going to see these words multiple times in the in this document, that 70B is not intended to duplicate or supersede the manufacturer's instructions. That's a very important piece of the puzzle, because if the manufacturer's instructions tell you to do something and say 70B doesn't, then you have to follow them. If maybe the gray area might arise if the manufacturer's instructions, for example, tell you to, I don't know, something ridiculous. Wax the outside of the panel board once every 3 years, and that's not in 70B. Well, you'd have to do that because the manufacturer tells you to put a wax on, wax off on the panel board once every 3 years. So you can't, hey, good morning, Felix. We got, excellent. It's great to have you here, Felix. So the manufacturers, this doesn't duplicate or supersede instructions provided by manufacturers. Now, here's the other interesting one. In 1.3 application, the standard, it says that systems and equipment covered by this document, covered by 70B, are typical of those that are installed for industrial plants, institutional and commercial buildings and large multifamily residential complexes. It doesn't say that it only pertains to those. And so here's my issue and my question. And I think if I have the panel board, I'm going to call it the load center that you have in a residential dwelling unit is a panel board, right? Now, this says systems and equipment covered are typical of those installed for industrial plants, institutional commercial buildings, and large multifamily residential complexes. That doesn't mean, I wouldn't take that as meaning it only applies to those areas. I would take that as meaning it applies to the systems and equipment that are typically found in those applications. Now, what would that mean to me? And the reason I identify that is because a lot of people think that a residential load center is not a panel board, and a panel board is not a residential load center. But in fact, a residential load center is a panel board. So these instructions could be used to maintain that panel board or load center. Now, the question would be, does 70B apply to a residential dwelling unit? That's a different discussion. But that application of the standard, it says the standard applies to maintenance for electrical, electronic, and communication systems and equipment and is not intended to duplicate. So that's what we just said. And then it says systems and equipment covered are typical of those installed for industrial plants and large but it doesn't say that it only applies to industrial plants and institutional and commercial buildings. So just mindset, just be mindful of that. So that's your application, that's your purpose, there's your scope. That's all chapter 1 is, your application does not cover, also it doesn't cover appliances that you would find in a residential dwelling unit. All right, so that's chapter 1. Chapter 2 are your reference publications. And what you'll find here are your NFPA publications, which is reserved. The Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 11th edition. I love it. So if you do not have a definition, this is what I wish was in the NEC. A reference like this that specifically calls out, if you think about the National Electrical Code, we always say that if there is not a term defined in the NEC, where do we go? And we reference this Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 11th edition. But to get to that reference publication, you've got to go through a bunch of other stuff. Willie Snyder, happy Tech Tuesday, brother. So I like the fact that they have a reference to Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary and the edition. And then there are references for extracts in mandatory sections, NFPA 70, the 2023 edition, and 70E, the 2021 edition. So that's chapter 2. Chapter 3 are all of your terms. I'm not going to go through all the terms. Chapter 4 is general. So, chapter 4. Again, it says in chapter 4, we said it in chapter 1, now we're saying it again, does not duplicate or supersede manufacturer's instructions. So here's the thing. Don't go dumpster diving. Well, actually, don't go searching on the web, right? That's the other thing that that you got to think about. So maybe it's no longer dumpster diving. Maybe it's don't go whatever your search engine preference is. All right. So now take a look at chapter 4, 4.2. Very much like 70E. So if I have a bunch of panel boards in my structure, my facility, I need to establish an electrical maintenance program. And I will use NFPA 70B to help me create the electrical maintenance program. So 70B isn't your end game. I think a lot of people miss this, not only about 70B, but also about 70E, because 70E says or does the exact same thing. And everybody should have their copy of 70E readily available with their Q&A from the Rocky Mountain chapter of the 2023 annual meeting. I was there last week. I'll tell you what. The Rocky Mountain chapter, man, that group does it right. They had almost 200 people there. I'm going to make a guess that it was almost 200. It may have been over 200. The room looked full. They had a great program, really great, really good presenters, and there was a there was a lot of engagement. This is what I love about some of these IAEI meetings. You go to the meeting, you get up on stage, you're doing a presentation, and sometimes, you know, in some sessions, hey, Jason Moore, good to see you. Late, Jason may be late, but he's worth the wait. So you go to some of these meetings and everybody sits there like a bump on a log, I call it, and they just want to get CU credits and get the heck out of there. Not the Rocky Mountain chapter, brother. I'll tell you what, they are 70s on my desk and he's out in the field. Not good, Willie. You got to take it with you, brother. You should have a copy of the 70E in your truck. You should have a copy of 70E in the bathroom, 70E in your next to your favorite recliner, and you should have a copy of 70E in the kitchen, because we know we all like to spend a lot of time in the kitchen. So have 70E readily available. But the Rocky Mountain chapter, they had a lot of questions, a lot of engagement. So 70E requires in section 110.5 that the employer shall implement and document an overall electrical safety program that directs activity appropriate to the risk associated with electrical hazards. So 70E, 70B, if you have panel boards in your facility, you don't say, I'm just going to get a copy of 70B and that's my maintenance plan. No, you need to create a maintenance plan. Hey, that's right, Jason. You got to have 70E on NFPA link on your phone. Whoa, man, Jason, then that means, Willie, you need to get 70E on your phone. You need to get NFPA link on your phone, and then you're out in the field, you would still have it, because I'm sure you're probably watching this or listening to this on your phone. I mean, come on. So 70E and 70B will tell you the, hey, George, good to see you, brother. George Corey. So 70E and 70B will tell you you have to have a maintenance, a 70B will tell you you have to have an electrical maintenance program, an EMP. Not an emergency medical physician, but an electrical maintenance program. Now, and you'll use what's in 70B to create that program. So, what does the general requirements for the electrical maintenance program consist of? They talk about the general requirements basically say, look, you have to have and implement a document, an overall EMP, just like 70E says. You have to implement and document a safety plan. You have to document an EMP that directs the activity appropriate to the safety and for and operational risk. So you're going to use 70B as a grab what you need. Inspection. EMP shall include elements to verify they have been inspected to comply with applicable installation codes. So the NEC. You have the important parts memories. So what now, the maintenance plan is referencing this book right here, right? Where would you go in the NEC? Where would you go in the NEC for panel boards to make sure that it's installed correctly? Because section 4.2.2 says the EMP shall include elements to verify that electrical equipment or systems have been inspected to comply with the applicable installation codes and standards. Even if you didn't pull a permit, right? We're going to go, so let's navigate our way. So we're in the code book and we say, well, a panel board is probably standard equipment. What's the title of chapter 4? Equipment for general use. That would be, you would say, well, it's probably very likely that a standard panel board is equipment for general use, probably found in chapter 4, equipment for general use. And then, so you know what chapter you're in. You're in the index. 408 is switchboards, switchgear, and panelboards. So Article 408 is going to be your reference for your panelboards. So if I were you, you would want to make sure that you have Article 408 for panelboards, which includes switchboards, and specifically there's Part 1 is general. So this applies to all switchboards, switchgear, and panelboards. And if you go to Part 3, you're going to know that, I think it's Part 3. Part 3 is panelboards. So you have the general requirements for panelboards. You have the overcurrent protection for panelboards. When it's supplied through a transformer, you have the delta breakers, the backfeed breakers, damp and wet location panelboards. You've got to make sure that that panelboard is installed per the NEC. Now, that's chapter 4, but you got to remember 1 through 3 and everything else applies too. So if it's in a hazardous locations, all that jazz, right? And if it has a circuit breaker in there that's 1200 amps and above, or a fuse that's 1200 amps and above, 240.87 and 240.67 respectively, apply to that application. So you've got to make sure you're implementing the NEC and you have that correct. And that's in the general requirements in chapter 4. So with a panel board, again, you're going to focus in on 408, but in my opinion, well, no, in reality, you can't forget about Article 240 for overcurrent protection. You can't forget about anything else, the proper sizing of the breakers for that are on that panel board for the conductors that are connected to it. The terminations, 110.14. You can't forget about terminations and the requirements for the installation. So my point is, Chapter 4 of NFPA 70B tells us that you have to follow the installation requirements. Unless the panel board is not rated for the conditions, then you don't need maintenance. I don't agree with that, Willie. I don't know. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say, it just says that verify the electrical equipment or systems have been inspected to comply with the applicable codes. So if the panel board is not rated for the conditions, then it would not apply. It would not comply with the NEC installation requirements, and then bam, then you have a problem. You have to fix that. Because maintaining something, I guess here's the point, Willie. If I have a vehicle that has 0 brakes, the brakes don't work. The brakes aren't even on. They forgot to put the brakes on the truck. There are no brakes. I can change the oil in that engine. I can check the air in the tires. I can do all kinds of great things. But the moment I get in that truck and go down the driveway, I'm going into my neighbor's front yard. Okay? So yes, you've got to deal with it. And you got to remove it and replace it, because that is a basic fundamental. So if I don't have brakes, I got to say, look, I'm not even going to worry about washing the doggone thing or putting the air in the tires, because I'm not allowed to drive it. I need to put brakes on this vehicle. So Ford, Chrysler, GM, please put brakes on our vehicles, right? And then I can follow the maintenance plan. All right, so that's the general requirements. Then there's that's inspection, making sure that it condition of maintenance. So you have to establish a condition of maintenance. And how do we do that? How do we do the establishing the condition of maintenance of an existing panel board that's installed? In my opinion, that's the hardest part. A is determining the condition, because I think that the condition of maintenance in some cases could be one of those calls. Like, for example, I might see, I don't know, I might see that the paint is worn off of the outside door enclosure. And I could go, boy, the condition of maintenance of that panel board is terrible. Why? Well, you know, everything inside looks great, but the enclosed panel board, Robert, the enclosed panel board. I can say the enclosure, there's paint coming off the corner of the bottom right corner. That's terrible. In my opinion, I might be one of those individuals that everything has to be perfect. So in some cases, condition of maintenance may be in the eyes of the beholder, but what in 70B helps muddle through that murky water, right? So condition of maintenance is found in chapter 9. I believe it's chapter 9. Yeah, chapter 9. Chapter 9 has, now I'm bouncing out of the general requirements. Remember, I've got a panel board. I'm looking at a panel board on the wall. I realize that I have to establish a plan in chapter 1, and I know that's my job. I go to chapter 4, it tells me I have to have an electrical maintenance program. Ooh, does the EMP have to be a written document, or is it acceptable to make use of a digital application that identifies what to do where? Oh, let's take a look. The equipment owner shall implement and document an overall EMP that directs activity appropriate to the, so in the general requirement doesn't say anything about it, about whether or not it's paper, whether or not it's written, whether or not it's digital, if it's a software application. It just says implement and document an overall EMP. So what does that mean to document? That's a good question. What does it mean to document? Let's do a search. Document. Document. Well, it's used in a bunch of different areas in the code. You know, I guess it's what your interpret, Jason. It's what is your interpretation of document. I think in a digital world. All right, here we go. What's this? This is chapter 32. Chapter 32 is on battery and storage systems. It just says document. So my argument would be, Jason, that there's nothing in here that would prohibit an electronic approach to your documentation. That's my opinion. It just says that EMP, chapter 4, the equipment owner shall implement and document an overall EMP that directs activity. There's the EMP shall include the following. So here's in 4 EMP principles. Now this is after the condition of maintenance. So we're going to get back to condition of maintenance. EMP principles. It says the EMP shall be designed to function in conjunction with the applicable safety program. The EMP shall include the following elements: an electrical safety program that addresses the condition of maintenance, identification of personnel responsible for implementing each element of the program, survey and analysis of electrical equipment, developed and documented maintenance procedures. Doesn't say whether it has to be, written out or anything. A plan of inspection, a maintenance equipment and personnel documentation and records retention policy. Still doesn't say if it can't be all digital. A process to prescribe, implement, and document corrective measures. So that could be completely digital. A process for incorporating design for maintainability. And a program review and revision process that considers failures, findings for continuous improvement. So, Jason, I think that you could make this a completely electronic, navigatable type of thing. So those are the principles. So you have to have those, and then EMP controls. You have to have the maintenance program shall identify the controls. and incident investigations. You have the electrical safety incidents, equipment malfunctions. So from a panel board perspective, if you had to replace, I don't know, you had to replace a cover, if you had to, if there were holes in the panel board that weren't covered and you had to cover them after the fact, if you had to maybe repaint the outside, any equipment malfunctions, and I would say that's the enclosure to the panel board, but on the panel board itself, you know, if you had a breaker malfunction or if you had a fusible switch malfunction, you had to replace circuit breakers or fuses that are in that panel board for whatever reason. If you had tripping of the breakers that are part of that panel board, that are on that panel board, you'll want to document and make sure you include all of those items. Operation of protective devices. So, because all of that may contribute to the condition of the panel board. For example, if you had multiple short circuit currents that you've interrupted through that panel board, you may want to, it's a lot of magnetic forces went through the panel board. All of that plays a role in determining the condition of maintenance for that piece of equipment. And then you have to have an audit. The EMP shall be audited at intervals not to exceed 5 years to verify that the principles and procedures of the EMP comply with the standard. And remember, EMP is an electrical maintenance program. All right, so that's everything that's in there. Now let's talk about the panel board itself. Now I'm getting into, I have to figure out what is the condition. If it's brand new, if it just was installed, I'm going to go to chapter 9. So I didn't say 10, I said 9. If I go to chapter 9, now this is your general overall maintenance intervals. It tells you again that the continuous that we have an allocation for continuous monitoring in 911, continuous monitoring and predictive techniques. So if I have a continuous monitoring system on this panel board for temperature, cycles, operation of circuit breakers, humidity, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different parameters that I can record in that panel board. And I can modify my maintenance intervals. So think about, I could have continuous or predictive techniques and technologies based upon manufacturer's instructions. So I can modify the maintenance intervals based upon information I'm gathering from the panel board in the enclosure, the temperature around the panel board, the humidity around the panel board, how many times breakers open and close, how many times they're reset from trips, how much fault current. I may be able to show you the waveforms, depending upon the technology. I may be able to show you the waveforms of the faults that were interrupted by all of those overcurrent protective devices in that piece of equipment. That's all information that I can use to adjust my maintenance interval. So panel boards, again, there's a lot of information I can get from a panel board. Enclosed panel board. Thank you, Robert. 901B, 90.1B, compliance with and proper maintenance. And that's exactly right. So maintenance frequency modifications. Once the initial frequency of inspection, and again, I came in here to look for condition. So right off the bat, I have the scope, and it talks about the continuous monitoring and maintenance frequency modifications. Frequency of maintenance, I'm looking for condition. There we go. Equipment condition assessment is in 90.3. 90.3. And just to be mindful, and I know I didn't do this, but chapter 13 in 70B. So remember, everything past chapter 10, chapter 11 through 38 are specific pieces of equipment. It just so happens I'm going to go to chapter 13 for panel boards and switchboards. Right now, I'm looking in chapter 9, maintenance intervals. So that is where I'm at right now. I'm in chapter 9, maintenance intervals. So I was in chapter 4, general requirements, and it told me that my maintenance plan has to consider conditions of maintenance. Where do I find that? In Chapter 9, and specifically 9.3, Equipment Condition Assessment. So this is where I establish the condition, whether it's a condition 1, 2, or 3. And there are 3 areas in 9.3. I have the physical condition of electrical equipment, I have the criticality condition of equipment, and the operating environment condition of equipment. So, physical condition of electrical equipment, equipment that is included in the EMP. Put this over here so I can read it. So, physical condition of electrical equipment, I have condition 1. The equipment appears like new. So I just installed it. Everything looks good. Now I'm looking at the panel board. Remember, the panel board doesn't necessarily include the enclosure, right? A panel board's a panel board. That's the guts of the enclosed panel board. This says the title of this chapter, title of chapter 13, I think it is panel boards and switchboards. But right now we're just looking at equipment condition. So I have to ascertain the condition of the panel board, but my issue is I don't think I can exclude the enclosure, right? I've got to include the enclosure for the physical condition. So I'm going to look at the panel board. If I see any paint on the panel board, all that good stuff. Or if it looks like it's pristine and in new condition, it's a physical condition 1. Physical condition 2 is if I had maintenance. So, for example, maybe I had to replace a circuit breaker because it saw a very high fault current, interrupted a very high fault current. I may have to replace a circuit breaker or a fusible switch or something of that nature inside that equipment. Those are more frequent maintenance than what you might plan on having for that equipment. So equipment physical condition 2 is the previous maintenance cycle has revealed issues requiring the repair or replacement of major equipment components. There have been notifications from the continuous monitoring system. There are active recommendations for predictive techniques. So what happens if I'm measuring the humidity and temperature and I'm getting alarms that my temperature is high in this enclosure around the panel board, or maybe my humidity has gone through the roof for whatever reason? Those would be alarms that are coming in, and if I see those alarms on the for a panel board, that single panel board might have a physical condition 2 because of those alarms, but other panel boards in and around that area may not. So I'm going to use as much information as I can to ascertain the condition of the panel board. Physical. A physical condition 3 has to be assigned where the changes in operation are noted. So the equipment has missed maybe the last 2 successive maintenance cycles. The previous 2 maintenance cycles, I found problems with the panel board. There's an active or unaddressed notification. So maybe, I've got high temperature alarms or high humidity alarms that have not been addressed because there is currently high temperature, high humidity, and it's been persistent and it hasn't been addressed. Well, maybe that's an indication. Maybe there's a trip breaker in there that hasn't been addressed. So that's the physical conditions. And also, there's non-serviceable equipment. You have to determine, maybe equipment that poses the risk of injury or negative health effects to personnel are designated as non-serviceable. And then access to non-serviceable equipment by unqualified persons is restricted. And then you have non-conforming product. That is equipment exhibiting characteristics that do not conform to any of those conditions that we just talked about. They must be identified as requiring corrective measures before returning it to a normal operating condition. All right, so then you got criticality condition. Now this, the criticality and the operating environment, those are 2 areas, in my opinion, that need some attention in the book. So let's talk about criticality condition of equipment. What it used to say was, let's say, for example, the equipment is critical to a process that might, if the process goes down, it could cost your facility millions of dollars an hour, minute. The criticality of the condition of that, the criticality of that equipment is very high. From a cost perspective, maybe the criticality, if the equipment fails, or if the equipment fails, then I put lives at risk, then the criticality of that equipment is very high from a life safety perspective. For example, I have a piece of a panel board that is supplying power to my life support system. Now, Robert might say, that's not very critical, Tom. I might say it's very critical, Robert. So that piece of equipment is critical to sustaining my life. Then I'm in a critical condition 3. So if failure of the equipment or system will endanger personnel, I'm in a criticality condition 3. If the equipment or failure of the equipment or system does not endanger personnel, then I'm in a 1 or a 2, and you would determine what's the 2 and what's the 1. So we modified the criticality condition of equipment to be solely based upon whether or not you put lives at risk if that equipment fails. So, and again, the reason I hesitate there is because, in my opinion, if any piece of electrical equipment fails, I put lives at risk. My toaster fails, and it's plugged in, put lives at risk. So I know where I know where we were going for with this, but I don't know. I don't know that we're there yet. But what we did strip out was the cost aspect, the financials aspect. But suffice it to say, this is input, a minimum requirement for your maintenance plan. Your facility may say, look, it's not going to kill anybody if that panel board fails, but it is going to cost our facility billions of dollars. You may elect to perform, elect to establish that condition higher. You may want to put a number 3 on it, even if it doesn't put lives at risk, is my point. This is a bare minimum requirement, right? And then you have the operating environment conditions. Now, an operating environment condition 3 is when the equipment is used in an environment with harsh chemicals, contaminants, or extreme operating conditions for which it is not specifically rated or evaluated. My issue with that language is, if it is used in equipment where it's not rated, I would question if you followed the code. So I believe we need some work in operating environmental conditions. So think about a panel board. If I have a panel board installed on a pier in a saltwater environment, and the panel board and its enclosure are listed for that environment, I think I would still want to I still might want to increase the maintenance intervals on that equipment. And I don't think I would treat it exactly the same as a panel board in an air-conditioned clean room. You get my drift? So it's a bare minimum requirement. But operating environment condition of equipment, it needs some work. But if your panel board is outside, you're going to probably want to look at that. You're going to want to take that into consideration. Even if you look at it exactly the same intervals, it may need more love in the long run sooner than something that's installed in a air-conditioned room. Just saying. Even if it's listed for the environment. The environment's harsh, right? All right, so that's where I get the condition of maintenance. So now I know the condition. I know I give it a 1, 2, or 3 for each of these: physical, critical, criticality, and operating, whichever is the worst. And remember, the higher the number is the worst, then that's how I label that piece of equipment. And that's going to determine my frequency of maintenance. And for panel boards, remember, there is a frequency of maintenance table. So for panel boards in general, there we go. For panel boards, there's your panel boards. It says visual inspection every 5 years, 3 years, and annual. This is condition 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the best, 2 is middle of the road, 3 is worst case. You're going to do a visual inspection every 5 years. You're going to clean it every 5 years. I'm going to assume condition 1. You're going to lubricate anything that needs to be lubricated every 5 years. You're going to do a mechanical inspection every 5 years. You're going to do electrical testing every 5 years. So it's 60, 36, 12. 60, 36, 12 for panel boards and switchboards. So now, once you understand the condition of the maintenance, you understand you're building your program, you understand you have a panel board or switch panel board. Let's take a look at chapter 13. It's relatively, chapter 13 is relatively a short one. Let's take a look at let's take a look at visual inspections. What do we do for visual inspections? We do an external physical condition. This includes condition integrity of any applied labels. We inspect anchorage and grounding, how it's mounted. We look at the circuit breakers, fuses, and the overload elements that are the right size and that correspond to the drawings and the power system studies. Now, what does that mean? We picked that up because if you have a selective coordination study, you want to make sure that whatever breakers are supposed to be there based on the selective coordination study or the short circuit study and the equipment evaluation study, you're going to want to make sure you have the right breakers and fuses. Verify instrument transformer ratio. So if there are CTs in that enclosed panel board, and I'm having a problem with the word panel board, we're going to have to say enclosed panel boards and switchboards. I really do believe so. Inspect insulators for damage or contaminated surfaces. Verify filters are clean and in place. You got to ensure maintenance devices and tools are available for equipment servicing. You have to verify any barriers are in place. Visually inspect the environmental controls that are provided, if there are any. And then for individual components, refer to the appropriate chapters of the standard. So for breakers, you have to go to the breaker chapter. If there's fuses, go to the fuse chapter. If there's a relay, go to the relay chapter. If there's an energy management system, go to that chapter. So item 11 on this list for visual inspections points us to all that other stuff that could be in a panel board. Now there are test types 1 and 2. 1 means online, 2 means offline. 1A is an enhanced test. That means you're doing it online. But if, for example, some sort of test results don't come back in a way that looks right, then you'll do the enhanced test. Same for 2A. All right, so that's the panel board visual inspections. And again, you go back to chapter 9 to tell you how often you do the visual inspections. 5 years, 3 years, annually. And you're going to do thermography annually, period. So you're going to do thermography every year on all of this equipment. That's based on chapter 9, thermography for all equipment annually. Cleaning. You're going to look at the bus insulation, cable insulation, any of the terminals and terminations. And you're going to clean with a contaminant to a contaminant-free state. Lubricate. Terminating devices, mechanical parts, and operating parts that exist to open, close, insert, and trip a circuit breaker. So now a panel board, you might have switches in there. I don't know. They're telling you that if there's any moving parts that need to be lubricated, then you need to lubricate them. I think in an enclosed panel board, you're probably limited in the amount of equipment that would need to be lubricated. I'm just going out on a limb there. Mechanical servicing. Let's look at mechanical servicing. You've got inspecting all the mechanical conditions. You ensure maintenance devices and tools are available. You have to inspect anchorage and grounding. Mechanically operate the circuit breakers and switches. You're going to turn them on and off. You're going to look at any of the bolted connection integrity, and you're going to see Chapter 7 to do that. So now you get pointed back to Chapter 7, which we didn't talk about. Chapter 7 are your types of tests that you're going to perform. So Chapter 7 is titled Fundamental Tests. That is where you're going to find the how to check torque, right? You can torque to 90%, and if the bolt doesn't move, then you can assume it's a good connection. You might do thermography. Chapter 7 tells you how to do thermography. You might inject current and measure temperatures. Chapter 7 will tell you how to do that. Any of those tests in the field, Chapter 7 is going to give you that guidance. Verify lubrication on moving current carrying parts and sliding surfaces. See the manufacturer's instructions. You're going to verify interlock systems for correct sequencing. Verify filters are clean and in place, fuse holders, etc. So there's 11 items. The 11th item, again, is that catch-all. Go check everything else. But I'll tell you that out of all of these mechanical tests, everything looks like the only thing you can do in the mechanical test that can be done energized or not, or online or offline. You could do it in the online condition is ensuring the maintenance devices and tools are available, which has nothing to do with the panel board. It's your tools. Everything else you're going to do in the mechanical servicing is offline. So you're going to establish an electrically safe work condition based on 70E work practices, and you're going to perform the mechanical servicing. That's mechanical servicing. Let's take a look at electrical testing. All right, so what are we going to do electrical wise? Connect the electrical hardware connections. Or check electrical hardware connections. That's per Chapter 7. So you're looking at you're going to be drawing a specific amount of current. If you're doing thermography, you can't turn it off and do thermography. Hey, thanks, Michael. Thanks for joining in. Have a great week. Measure the insulation resistance of the main bus. You have to measure insulation resistance of the control wiring. You have to test protective. Now, measuring insulation resistance of control wiring is 2A. That means it's an offline, not optional. It's an offline enhanced test. So if you measured the insulation resistance of the main bus, or you see other items that maybe didn't come out the way you expected, then you're going to want to do the control wiring. Test protective devices and systems. This is an offline test. For surge protective devices, surge arresters, and arc fault energy reduction, see the manufacturer's instructions. So the protective devices, you might have an arc flash reduction maintenance system in there. You might have zone selective interlocking in there. And what this is telling you, or surge, this is telling you to take to see the manufacturer's instructions for proper maintenance. And yes, Willie, we do not want to have an unintended rapid disassembly in the field. It is called ungood. So, number 6, test control power transformers, instrument transformers, and metering to ensure correct operation. That's an offline test. You're going to take the panel board offline, you're going to establish electrically safe work condition, and you're going to perform tests, electrical tests on the transformers and any instrument transformers, make sure everything is working correctly. And then again, you're going to refer to individual components. And then where environmental controls are provided, you have to check for the proper operating conditions. So this would be your fans, your heaters, your thermostats, humidity control equipment, and all of their settings. Make sure it's performing correctly. That's your electrical testing. And that's it. That's it. So I think out of the takeaway of this, if it's a new, if your panel board and enclosed panel board are in great condition, every 5 years, you're going to establish an electrically safe work condition on that panel board, take it out of service. You're going to take the dead fronts off. You're going to inspect all of the breakers. You're going to turn the breakers on and off. You're going to cycle them. You are going to clean, make sure there's no dust in the bottom of the panel boards. You're going to vacuum all of that stuff out. You're going to clean the insulation and the insulators and all that good stuff. You're going to verify all of the breakers have the right ratings. They're the right breakers based upon the documentation. You're going to do your visual inspections. You're going to do your cleaning. You're going to do your mechanical inspection, all of your physical mechanical stuff. Then if you have to do any electrical tests, you're going to do all of those. And let's take a look. In the electrical tests, they're pretty much everything is going to be de-energized. You're going to establish an electrically safe work condition to do all of this stuff. You know, to do operational tests, you can do it energized or not. And then your environmental controls, you can do it energized or not. The only thing that I would say you would have to absolutely make sure it's energized is if you're going to do thermography, which you have to do annually. So you're going to have to take the dead front off annually. Take the dead front. If you don't have those little windows in there, IR windows, you could put IR windows in the trough of a panel board. They make them. They're out there. And then you can do your thermography. If you don't have those IR windows, then you're going to have to remove the dead front. That's justified energized work. And you're going to do your thermography, and then you're going to put the dead front cover back on again annually. But every 5 years, the longest time frame, you're going to be taking and establishing an electrically safe work condition and all that jazz. So that's panel boards and maintenance. I don't know about you, but I don't know. I think that we covered a lot. A little bit about 70B, a little bit about the navigate. You can see how you're navigating through 70B, right? The only thing I did not talk about in Chapter 8, Chapter 8, field tests and methods. That's where you have your testing category types. That is your type, category 1 and 1A, 2 and 2A. I did mention that, and they explain that in Chapter 8. They talk about the qualifications of the individual who's doing the maintenance, all that good stuff. So all of that is around panel boards per 70B, and I'm not covering the individual manufacturer's instructions. I will tell you, I will tell you this, that there is a document. I will end on this one. There is a document that you may want to be aware of, and it is called NEMA, ANSI NEMA PB 1.1, and this is dated 2013, the general instructions for proper installation, operation, and maintenance of panel boards rated 600 volts and less. And it's published by NEMA. It is published by the National Electrical Manufacturers Association. And let's look at this. Chapter 6 is installation of panel boards. Chapter 7 is steps to be taken before energizing. 8, installation of cabinet fronts, energized equipment. And then look, Chapter 10, maintenance. You have the program. So this is another great reference for you, because this was developed by all of the manufacturers of panel boards, and they all agreed on these steps to take for maintenance. Fuse clips, plug fuses, conditions which cause overheating, proper ampere voltage, operation of all mechanical components. So damaged insulation materials and assemblies, moisture, signs of preventness. So signs of previous wetness, preventness. I called it preventness, previous wetness. Cracks. So that's another great reference for you. I will put it in the chat. Here it is here, Control C. I'm going to throw it over here on the chat. So you have a copy of that. That should go out to Facebook and YouTube. So hopefully you have this. And look, it's a electronic copy is $0, and that is what we like, right, Willie? We like that $0. All right, everybody, it's past my time. I'm 5 minutes over. I appreciate you joining in, and I appreciate you joining in and taking your lunch to talk maintenance with me on Panelboards. Check out last week's on switches. Let me know if you have questions about maintenance, because 70B is now a standard. We got to get used to it. We got to get our head wrapped around it. We have to understand the implications of that. We have to understand how it relates to 70E for safe work practices. Willie Snyder, everybody out there who joined in, thank you for joining. Thank you, Jason. Thanks for joining in this session. Take care, stay safe, and please stay healthy. Catch you next week.